This is one of those weeks in the readings. There are about 2 or 3 of them in the year where you'll have a little phrase. In this case, it's out of the gospel text. It's almost like it sabotages that whole week's worth of readings because you can't let it go by without commenting on it. So this whole phrase in this week's gospel text about Jesus responding to this woman who's come to him seeking help. I'll comment on that later, so I am going to comment on that a bit. But I also want to principally talk about this reading the letter of James. I have said countless times, I think James is probably one of my favorite books in the whole Bible, or the letter. And because James is so clear and he pulls no punches in that. So let's look at that reading when James is saying about, chastising the community, about how they're showing favoritism if someone comes in with furs and fine gold rings and all this stuff. And he's talking about how people show partiality, favoritism. And so think about the contemporaneous culture of that day that we see reflected in a number of parables, and whether it's Lazarus and the rich man, stories about some of the healings. Think about the story of how Jesus responds when he's asked about the collapse of the Tower of Siloam and all the people who were killed, and were they greater sinners than everyone else. And so we see a particular worldview reflected in a whole number of snippets throughout the New Testament. And that is a worldview that goes kind of like this, that if you are sick or suffering or poor, it is an indication you must be a tremendous sinner or an obstinate sinner or an unrepentant sinner, or you've done something wrong and God is getting you, God is mad, God is zapping you, God is punishing you, something like that. And we can still see that value system at work in the world today on occasion. And the problem with that is a corollary naturally develops from that, right? And it developed in Jesus' day too. The corollary is that if you are exceedingly wealthy and just seem to be having an easy time in life and all that sort of thing, then you and God, you must be like that. You're sort of a step below holy somehow. And what develops out of that is almost like a quality difference of the person in people's perceptions. And so James is pushing the community on, if church is supposed to be a reflection to the world, to the broader community, of what life with God at the center is like, and God does not show such partiality, such favoritism, then we mustn't do so in the church either. We have got to approach every person as a wonderful, glorious child of God. God doesn't show favoritism. God doesn't work that way. And so just park that aside for a minute, and let's quickly turn to the gospel reading in this issue about not throwing crumbs to the dogs, and a couple of things I want to comment on about that. I can't help but wonder with this phrase and the story of the Syrophoenician woman at the well, I can't help but wonder if there was some sort of contemporaneous figure of speech, common phrase, colloquial phrase that Jesus is using or referring to in those texts that is totally and completely lost on us 2,000 years later. That's one part of an approach to this text. The other part of the approach to this text is this woman believes that her daughter is gravely ill. I have certainly met in my life on occasion people who can tend to exaggerate the severity of this or that situation. I've certainly met on occasion in my life people who maybe have a particular penchant for maybe making things a little bit more dramatic than they really need to be or really are. And I wonder if that's a part of what's going on in this exchange too. What I do know is that I trust Jesus. And what this other person is about and her motives and all of that, I don't know anything about that, but I do trust Jesus. And so, whoops. Sorry, we just had a car. I didn't know what was going on behind us. St. Thomas is here on the property. Sometimes some interesting things happen. and we're right downtown and all, so I wasn't sure what was happening behind me there for a minute. So what I was saying about I do trust Jesus in this. And so here's a part of how I look at this exchange with him. By this point in his ministry, he has seen how immense the need is, right? He's been, by this point, crowds are growing. His reputation is spreading. People are coming out to hear him and see him, and he knows how great the need is. And so I think a part of his response is he's exhausted, and he needs to not lose focus on where he needs to start in his ministry, in spreading the good news. What is his initial focus and target group? So that can go kind of like this. I get asked to be on a number of community boards. And every single one of those boards that I've been asked to be on are doing phenomenal work in the community. I support them 100%, 200%. Groups that are doing tremendous work. We can't get stretched too thinly, though. I tend to be one of those sort of all-in type of people, so that when I join an organization or get involved with an organization, like, you've really got me, I'm all in. And so I can't spread myself out too thinly around all of these other really great causes. I have, a number of different groups that I'm involved with in the community and I need to limit it to those little groups. And so out of these readings this week, they suggest to me or remind me individually, corporately as church, the needs around us are great. But we have to discern what are our gifts, what are my gifts, what are the things that I can reasonably put some energy into in the community where a difference can be made. What is God calling me to? And to go back to that gospel text, because that discernment may take us down a variety of unexpected and interesting roads. So that gospel text, we're told the man that Jesus interacts with after this issue with the woman and her daughter, that he can't speak right and he can't hear right. And it's curious to me that the words Jesus says to him is, be opened. And so when I put that together with this letter from James, what I take from these texts, is when we can be open, when we can approach the world with no favoritism or partiality, all of those ways that we divide the world up in terms of, a variety of different groups of people and divisions of people, and all those ways that we divide the world up, when we can just ditch all of that, show no favoritism, no partiality, see everyone we interact with as a glorious and wonderful, amazing creation, a child of God, when we can be opened, showing no partiality, we see God all around us. We see the Spirit of Jesus active in our lives, active in the lives of other people, all around us. But we have to get rid of our obsessions with control and trying to create the world as we would have it. Instead, be open, show no partiality, and you will meet God every day. Amen.